Leeds Travels and Lifestyles presents the top 20 most corrupt countries in the world. The issue of corruption is a global problem that affects countries across all levels of development, but there are countries whose level of corruption is so alarming. According to Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index, some of the world's most corrupt countries include Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, Yemen, Venezuela, Afghanistan, and North Korea. These nations often suffer from weak governance, lack of transparency, and a culture of impunity that allows corruption to thrive. Corruption can take many forms, such as bribery, embezzlement, nepotism, and the misuse of public office for private gain. It undermines economic development, erodes public trust, and disproportionately harms the poor and vulnerable. Highly corrupt countries tend to struggle with political instability, poor public services, and environmental degradation. Addressing corruption requires a multifaceted approach that tackles the root causes through economic, political, and institutional reforms. Below are the top most corrupt countries in the world, starting from least to worst. Number 20. Burundi. Corruption in Burundi is a systemic issue that has deeply entrenched itself within the fabric of society, posing significant challenges to governance and development efforts. The country's struggle with corruption is multifaceted, ranging from petty bribery to more complex forms of malpractice that permeate various levels of public administration. The street-level corruption, as revealed by research, sheds light on the critical influence of informal practices among public employees, such as tax collectors and local accountants, who engage in bribery and cronyism, perpetuating a culture of corruption. One of the key factors contributing to the persistence of corruption in Burundi is the lack of effective monitoring and enforcement mechanisms, allowing corrupt practices to flourish unchecked. The influence of political parties like the CNDD-FDD further complicates the situation, creating a climate where loyalty to social networks often outweighs adherence to formal rules and regulations. This dynamic not only undermines public trust in state institutions but also hampers efforts to combat corruption effectively. Moreover, the implementation of anti-corruption strategies in Burundi faces significant challenges, with reports indicating a lack of political backing and inadequate resources for corruption prevention bodies. The absence of transparency and accountability in governance processes further exacerbates the problem, hindering the country's ability to address corruption effectively. In conclusion, Burundi's battle against corruption requires comprehensive reforms that address not only legal frameworks but also the underlying social norms and power dynamics that perpetuate corrupt practices. Efforts to combat corruption must prioritize strengthening accountability mechanisms, enhancing transparency, and fostering a culture of integrity across all levels of society and government. Number 19. Chad. Chad is a country known for its lively culture and beautiful scenery, is dealing with high level of corruption. Even though people are trying to fix it, corruption is still causing a lot of trouble in Chad. It makes people lose trust in their government and makes it hard for the country to move forward. One way corruption happens in Chad is through bribery. This is when people in power ask for or take money or gifts in exchange for doing favors. For example, government officials might take bribes to speed up paperwork or approve projects. This isn't fair because it gives an advantage to those who can pay. Another way corruption shows up is through embezzlement. This is when officials steal or misuse public money for themselves instead of using it for things like schools or roads. This makes it even harder for the country to improve and for people to have better lives. Nepotism and cronyism are also problems in Chad. This is when people in power give special treatment to their friends, family, or people they like when giving out jobs or resources. This isn't fair because it means others who are more qualified might miss out. Corruption can also affect the courts and police in Chad. Sometimes, bribes or political pressure can make it hard for regular people to get fair treatment under the law. To fix corruption in Chad, everyone needs to work together. It means making sure leaders are honest and that everyone follows the rules. It's going to take a lot of effort, but it's important to make Chad a better place for everyone. Number 18. Sri Lanka. Corruption is one of the major issues in Sri Lanka. It's like a disease that's spreading everywhere and stopping the country from moving forward. It's not just in politics, it's happening in many parts of life, making people lose trust in their leaders and each other. Politicians, for example, sometimes do bad things to get more money or help their friends and family instead of helping everyone like they should. They might take money from the government that should be used for important things like building roads or schools and keep it for themselves. Even in the courts, where people should get fair treatment, money and politics can sometimes get in the way. This means some people might not get treated fairly because someone paid money or had the right connections. In businesses too, corruption can be a problem. Companies might give money or gifts to get special treatment or contracts. This isn't fair to other businesses and makes it hard for the economy to grow. There have been some efforts to stop corruption, like making new laws and groups to fight it. But if Sri Lanka really wants to get rid of corruption, it needs to make big changes to how things are done and make sure everyone is honest and open about what they're doing. Otherwise, things will stay the same, and the country won't be able to get better. Number 17. Eritrea. Corruption is a big problem in Eritrea, especially among the government and military leaders. They use their power to do illegal activities without getting in trouble. For example, high-ranking military officials are involved in illegal trades like smuggling and trafficking people. They even force people to work for them without paying them fairly. The government doesn't do much to stop this corruption. In fact, it kind of supports it. The president's office often turns a blind eye to what the military is doing. Eritrea has a big military, and a lot of people are forced to join it. Because of this, the military has a lot of power and control, and they misuse government money for their own benefit. The ruling party in Eritrea, called the Front for Democracy and Justice, also has a big say in everything, including the country's businesses. They manage a fund that controls most of the major companies in Eritrea. But this fund is not properly checked for any wrongdoing, so there's no accountability if they misuse the money. The lack of fair courts and democratic systems also makes it hard to stop corruption. Even special courts set up to deal with corruption cases don't do much. Overall, corruption is widespread in Eritrea, and it's the government and military leaders who benefit the most from it. Number 16. Democratic Republic of the Congo. Corruption in the Democratic Republic of the Congo has been a long-standing issue, deeply rooted in its political and social fabric. Despite recent efforts to combat corruption, the country continues to face significant challenges in this regard. One notable case involved President Felix Tshisekedi's chief of staff, Vital Kamerhe, who was found guilty of embezzling nearly $50 million of public funds and sentenced to 20 years of hard labor in June 2020. However, Kamerhe's release in December 2021 raised concerns about the effectiveness of anti-corruption measures. Additionally, a judicial investigation targeting former President Joseph Kabila and his associates was initiated in November 2021 following allegations of embezzling $138 million. Corruption in the Democratic Republic of the Congo extends beyond high-profile cases to affect various sectors of society. The public services sector faces a very high risk of corruption, with reports indicating that bribes are often necessary for obtaining business licenses and permits. Moreover, the land administration sector presents a high corruption risk, with companies expecting to give gifts to officials when applying for construction permits. These examples underscore the pervasive nature of corruption in the DRC, highlighting the need for sustained efforts to address this systemic issue and promote transparency and accountability in governance. Number 15. Pakistan. Corruption remains a pervasive issue in Pakistan, with the country ranking 140th out of 180 countries in Transparency International's 2021 Corruption Perceptions Index. The problem extends across various sectors, including government, judiciary, police, healthcare, and education. One of the major corrupt practices in Pakistan is tax evasion. According to a 2002 study, 99% of respondents reported facing corruption in taxation, with 32% paying bribes to lower their tax assessments and 14% receiving fictitious tax assessments until a bribe was paid. Corruption is also rampant in the judiciary, with a 2011 survey by Transparency International Pakistan identifying the judiciary as the most corrupt institution in the country. The survey found that 33.62% of people reported court employees as the main culprits, followed by public prosecutors 23.73%, witnesses 14.12%, and judges 12.43%. The mainstream media in Pakistan has played a crucial role in exposing major corruption scandals, such as the Rental Power Project scandal, the Pakistan International Airlines corruption case, and the Avonfield Properties case involving former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. despite ongoing efforts to combat corruption, such as the establishment of the National Accountability Bureau. The problem remains deeply entrenched in Pakistan's political and social fabric. Addressing corruption will require a comprehensive approach, including strengthening institutions, improving transparency, and fostering a culture of accountability. Number 14. Myanmar. Corruption in Myanmar is a pervasive issue that deeply impacts various sectors of society. The country's Transparency International Corruption Perceptions Index score of 20 in 2023 reflects the severity of the problem, ranking Myanmar 162nd out of 180 countries. Corruption thrives in every aspect of government and business, hindering investment and trade. The Saffron Revolution in 2007 highlighted public discontent with the military government's kleptocracy, leading to violent crackdowns on protests. In Myanmar, bribery is culturally ingrained, with illicit payments common for government services, tax reductions, and customs duties. The extractive industries, land management, policing, and the judiciary are particularly vulnerable to corruption. Women face additional challenges due to gendered divisions of labor, with corruption prevalent in sectors like education and healthcare. Recent crackdowns on corruption, such as the conviction of high-ranking officials like Mo Mayintun, reveal the complex dynamics of corruption intertwined with political power struggles in Myanmar. Addressing corruption in Myanmar requires comprehensive efforts to strengthen anti-corruption frameworks and address systemic gaps to foster transparency and accountability across all sectors. Number 13. Sudan. Sudan, a country in northeastern Africa, is notorious for its widespread corruption, which has become deeply ingrained in its political and economic systems. The country's corruption is so pervasive that it is considered one of the most corrupt nations in the world, with corruption affecting every sector of the economy and every level of government. One of the most significant examples of corruption in Sudan is the embezzlement of public funds. In 2014, the Sudanese Auditor General reported that $58,403 million was stolen from the Ministry of Budget between 2013 and 2014, but no action was taken against the ministries involved. This lack of accountability in public budgeting is a major obstacle to foreign investment and development in the country. Another significant issue is the corruption in the natural resource sector. The Sudanese Auditor General has reported corrupt figures in the oil sector, with 61% of the 196 oil companies operating in Sudan evading tax and accused of misusing oil revenues. This lack of transparency and accountability in the management of natural resources is a major concern for investors and the international community. The judiciary in Sudan is also plagued by corruption, with court rulings often influenced by political interference and bribery. This lack of impartiality in the judicial system is a significant challenge for foreign investors seeking to resolve disputes in the country. Overall, corruption in Sudan is a significant barrier to economic development and stability in the country. The government's lack of effective anti-corruption measures and the widespread practice of corruption among public officials have created an environment where corruption is often tolerated and even encouraged. Number 12. Tajikistan. Corruption in Tajikistan is a deeply rooted issue that permeates various levels of society and governance. Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index ranks Tajikistan 150th out of 180 countries, highlighting the systemic nature of corruption in the country. The prevalence of bribery, embezzlement of state funds, nepotism, and lack of accountability within the government are common practices that have become normalized. The government's inability to address these issues effectively has led to a significant loss of public trust. High-level corruption intertwines with political instability, weakened institutions, and even criminal activities, contributing to a culture of corruption that extends to organized crime and illicit markets. One prominent example of corruption in Tajikistan involves the distribution of land parcels in sought-after areas like the Rudaki district. Former District Governor Rustam Akramzoda has been accused of fast-tracking land allocations for his relatives and acquaintances, bypassing legal procedures and disadvantaging other residents. This case exemplifies how corruption undermines fair governance and perpetuates inequality, as well as erodes public confidence in the government's ability to uphold transparency and accountability. Despite efforts to combat corruption, the country continues to grapple with deeply ingrained corrupt practices that hinder its progress towards a more transparent and accountable society. Number 11. Libya. corruption in Libya has been a long-standing issue that has significantly impacted the country's governance, economy, and society. The post-Mohammed Gaddafi era has seen a surge in corrupt practices that have hindered the nation's progress towards stability and development. One of the major corrupt practices in Libya involves the mismanagement of state funds and resources by politicians and militias, leading to widespread embezzlement and theft. For instance, the Libyan Investment Authority (LIA) filed lawsuits against international banks like Societe Generale and Goldman Sachs for alleged fraudulent activities, highlighting the extent of corruption within financial institutions. Moreover, the influence of foreign companies engaging in corrupt practices within Libya has further exacerbated the situation. Cases involving companies like SNC-Lavalin and Yara International point to a pattern of bribery and unethical conduct that has undermined the country's economic integrity. Additionally, the lack of transparency and accountability in the selection of companies for projects, coupled with the complicity of anti-corruption bodies, has perpetuated a culture of corruption in Libya. These examples underscore the urgent need for comprehensive anti-corruption measures and enforcement mechanisms to combat the deep-rooted corruption that continues to plague Libya. Addressing corruption is crucial for fostering trust in institutions, promoting economic growth, and ensuring a stable and prosperous future for the Libyan people. Number 10. Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan is widely regarded as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Ranking near the bottom of global corruption indices, the country suffers from widespread graft that permeates every sector of the economy and government. Bribery is endemic, with payoffs required to obtain even basic public services. Registering a business can cost between $6,000 to $10,000 in under-the-table payments. The customs and tax authorities are particularly corrupt, with importers facing demands for bribes to clear goods. Procurement processes are highly opaque, with large projects awarded through arbitrary, unregulated means. The judiciary is subservient to the political leadership and routinely issues rulings based on instructions from the president's office, rather than the rule of law. Courts are used to punish dissent and remove potential threats, with no independent oversight. Corruption also runs rampant in the police force, with officers frequently extorting bribes from drivers and travelers. A recent investigation revealed how a $51 million state-built beauty clinic was secretly privatized and sold at a massive discount to the president's family. This blatant self-dealing exemplifies the kleptocratic nature of Turkmenistan's government, where the ruling elite brazenly exploit public assets for personal gain. Overall, Turkmenistan's entrenched culture of corruption has severely undermined the country's economic development and deterred foreign investment. Meaningful anti-corruption reforms remain elusive in the absence of political will and independent institutions to combat graft. Number 9. Equatorial Guinea. Equatorial Guinea, as a country rich in natural resources, is plagued by widespread corruption that has devastating consequences for its citizens. The government, led by President Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbisogo, has been accused of perpetuating a system of corruption that is deeply entrenched and highly effective in maintaining the elite's grip on power and wealth. One of the most notable examples of corruption in Equatorial Guinea is the lavish lifestyle of President Obiang's son, Teodoro Nguema Obiang Mangu. He was convicted in France of embezzling and laundering public funds, and his assets, including a 101-room mansion in Paris, were seized. Similarly, the United States and Switzerland have also recovered assets from Teodorin, which are intended to be returned to the people of Equatorial Guinea. The corruption in Equatorial Guinea is not limited to the Obiang family. The government's control over the country's natural resources, particularly oil and gas, has led to widespread mismanagement and embezzlement. The country's budget is not transparent, and public procurement is not transparent, allowing for easy diversion of funds to private accounts. This has resulted in a significant portion of the population living in poverty, despite the country's wealth. The corruption in Equatorial Guinea is not only a problem for the country's citizens, but also for the international community. It undermines the rule of law and creates an environment conducive to other forms of corruption, such as money laundering and tax evasion. The international community must continue to pressure the government to address these issues and ensure that the recovered assets are used for the benefit of the people of Equatorial Guinea, not just the elite. Number 8. Haiti. Haiti is plagued by widespread and systemic corruption that has crippled the country's development and governance. According to Transparency International's 2023 Corruption Perceptions Index, Haiti ranks 172nd out of 180 countries, indicating one of the highest levels of public sector corruption in the world. Some of the major corrupt practices in Haiti include 1. Embezzlement and misappropriation of public funds. The Anti-Corruption Agency uncovered cases of officials diverting millions of dollars from government projects and agencies, such as the National Lottery and the National Police. A former mayor was accused of setting up City Hall in his mother's home and not paying taxes on the property. 2. Nepotism and political patronage. Haiti's constitution has been bastardized by lawmakers to use it as a tool for blackmail and to install unqualified allies in government posts. A Haitian senator openly admitted that the government relies on the distribution of money to get prime ministers ratified. 3. Collusion between politicians, businesses, and criminal gangs. Corruption has enabled criminal gangs to thrive, with some government officials accused of protecting and enabling these groups. Sanctions have targeted politicians, businessmen, and former officials for their involvement in corruption and ties to gangs. The pervasive corruption in Haiti has severely undermined the rule of law, public services, and economic development, contributing to the country's ongoing political and humanitarian crises. Number 7. North Korea. Corruption in North Korea has become deeply entrenched, permeating all levels of the government and society. Some of the major corrupt practices in the country include: bribery is the most common form of corruption in North Korea. Officials at all levels routinely demand bribes to perform their duties or turn a blind eye to illegal activities. This includes arranging job transfers, promotions, or foreign postings in exchange for kickbacks. Embezzlement is also widespread, with officials siphoning state resources and funds for personal gain. The collapse of North Korea's planned economy has further fueled corruption, as government departments seek to earn foreign currency and resources by any means necessary, even if it involves illegal activities. This has led to a system where civil servants resemble organized criminal gangs more than public servants. Corruption also extends beyond North Korea's borders, with the regime engaging in illicit activities like drug trafficking, counterfeiting, and human trafficking to generate revenue. These criminal enterprises undermine the international community and deny North Korean citizens a framework to sustain their livelihoods within the law. While the regime has at times launched anti-corruption campaigns, these efforts have had limited success, as the political system remains structured to reward loyalty to the regime over adherence to the rule of law. As a result, corruption has become deeply entrenched in North Korean society. Number 6. Nicaragua. Corruption in Nicaragua has been a long-standing issue, deeply entrenched in the country's political and economic systems. Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index ranks Nicaragua among the most corrupt countries globally, with a score of 17 out of 100. Under the Daniel Ortega regime, corruption has become institutionalized, with public resources misused for private gain. One significant example is the misuse of over $4 billion from Venezuelan state cooperation to fund private businesses of the presidential family and their associates. This massive theft of resources from the poor to benefit the elites highlights the detrimental impact of corruption on the most vulnerable in society. Moreover, cronyism is prevalent, with political figures rewarding allies and family members with powerful positions within the government, reminiscent of past dictatorships in Nicaragua. The lack of transparency, accountability, and democratic governance has allowed corruption to flourish across various sectors, including energy distribution, infrastructure projects, and real estate investments. The country's anti-corruption institutions, although well-developed on paper, are highly susceptible to political interference, hindering effective enforcement of anti-corruption laws. Nicaragua's struggle with corruption underscores the urgent need for comprehensive reforms, genuine institutional revolution, and a shift towards transparent and accountable governance to combat this pervasive issue and promote sustainable development. Number 5. Yemen. Corruption in Yemen has been deeply entrenched, exacerbated by the ongoing conflict that has transformed into an economic battle. Various factions fight over crucial resources, leading to systematic corruption that has plagued the country long before 2014. The war economy has intensified existing corruption challenges, allowing illicit wealth accumulation for new power brokers and networks. Corruption is widespread across sectors like public services, land administration, tax administration, customs, and public procurement. For instance, businesses often expect to give gifts to officials for operating licenses, construction permits, and tax assessments. The lack of accountability and regulatory capacity further fuels corruption, hindering the country's development and creating a challenging environment for investors. The culture of corruption has infiltrated all aspects of public and private affairs, leading to weak government performance, deteriorating service quality, and a lack of job opportunities. Addressing corruption in Yemen requires resolute leadership, strong legal punishments for offenders regardless of status, and effective anti-corruption mechanisms to combat the deep-rooted corrupt practices that continue to plague the nation. Number 4. South Sudan. South Sudan is a country plagued by civil war and economic instability, has struggled to combat widespread corruption that permeates all levels of government and the economy. The country's dependence on oil exports has created an environment where corruption thrives, with the oil industry being a major driver of rent-seeking behavior. This has led to the capture of nominally independent institutions by the executive branch, making it difficult to implement reforms aimed at reducing corruption. One of the most significant examples of corruption in South Sudan is the diversion of public funds by political elites. According to a report by the UN Commission on Human Rights in South Sudan, more than $73 million has been stolen from public coffers since 2018, with almost $39 million taken during a period of less than 2 months. This corruption has been linked to the country's ongoing conflict and has undermined the economic, social, and cultural rights of citizens. Another major issue is the bribery and nepotism that affects the allocation of grants and jobs in the aid sector. Local NGOs have reported being asked for bribes by national or regional staff in order to secure contracts or jobs with the United Nations, international NGOs, and donor countries. This has led to a culture of corruption where even aid organizations are not immune to the corrupt practices prevalent in the country. The government's lack of capacity or willingness to counter corruption has contributed to the persistence of these corrupt practices. The country's ranking as one of the most corrupt in the world, according to Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, underscores the severity of the problem. Addressing corruption in South Sudan will require a concerted effort from the government, civil society, and international organizations to implement effective anti-corruption measures and ensure accountability for those involved in corrupt activities. Number 3. Syria. Corruption has eaten deeply into the fabric of Syria, permeating every aspect of life and exacerbating the country's ongoing crisis. According to Transparency International's 2023 Corruption Perceptions Index, Syria ranks 177th out of 180 countries, indicating an extremely high level of public sector corruption. One of the most prevalent forms of corruption is the need for ordinary Syrians to pay bribes to access basic rights and services. Government workers, who receive low salaries, often demand bribes to provide access to food, fuel, education, and even medical care. The judicial system is also plagued by corruption, with over half of respondents believing they lack fair and transparent access to the courts. Corruption is said to be carried out with the blessing and supervision of responsible departments and officials with little political will to combat it. Corruption has also fueled Syria's status as a narco-state, with the 4th Armored Division, led by Bashar al-Assad's brother, overseeing the production and distribution of drugs like Captagon. Massive drug shipments have been seized in neighboring countries, underscoring the scale of this illicit trade. The pervasive nature of corruption in Syria has severely damaged the country's economy and social fabric, entrenching inequality and undermining public trust in institutions. Addressing this systemic issue will be crucial for Syria's future recovery and stability. Number 2. Venezuela. Venezuela is plagued by widespread and systemic corruption that has crippled the country's economy and institutions. The Bolivarian government under Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro has been frequently accused of corruption, abuse of power, and mismanagement of the economy for personal gain. Maduro's regime has engaged in numerous corrupt schemes, including embezzlement from the state-owned oil company PDVSA. In 2015, the U.S. Treasury Department found that a European bank had accepted exorbitant commissions to process $2 billion in transactions related to Venezuelan shell companies, siphoning funds from PDVSA. Corruption has also infiltrated Venezuela's food distribution program, the local Committees for Supply and Production CLAP. In 2017, the Venezuelan National Assembly uncovered instances where the regime spent $42 for a box of food that cost less than $13, with the difference pocketed by Maduro's inner circle, totaling over $200 million. Furthermore, the Maduro government has been accused of facilitating drug trafficking and money laundering. Corrupt officials have collaborated with criminal organizations to export Venezuelan gold and oil, disguising the origins of these illicit commodities. Venezuela's political unrest and economic collapse have created an environment that allows transnational criminal groups to operate with impunity. The pervasive corruption in Venezuela has contributed to the country's humanitarian crisis, economic collapse, and mass exodus of its citizens. Addressing this systemic graft remains a significant challenge for any future Venezuelan government. Number 1. Somalia. Somalia is widely regarded as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Corruption is endemic throughout the public and private sectors, affecting virtually every aspect of Somali society. Some of the major corrupt practices in Somalia include: 1. Misuse of public funds. There is a severe lack of accountability in the receipt and expenditure of public funds by the government. Estimates suggest that up to 68% of government funds were unaccounted for between 2009 to 2010. Government officials have been accused of embezzling and misappropriating public money for personal gain. 2. Bribery and patronage networks. Bribery is commonplace across sectors, from accessing basic public services to securing government contracts. Powerful political and business elites have established patronage networks to obtain employment, political appointments, and other favors. 3. Corruption in the security sector. The Somali security forces, including the police and military, are plagued by corruption. There are reports of army leaders inflating troop numbers to obtain greater funding, as well as the diversion of revenue from ports and customs. 4. Lack of transparency in public procurement. Public procurement processes often lack transparency and oversight, with secret contracting and the diversion of public funds being widespread. The pervasive corruption in Somalia has severely undermined the government's ability to provide basic services and security to its citizens, fueling further instability and conflict in the country. Conclusion: corruption is a pervasive issue that plagues many countries worldwide, hindering their growth and development. To address this critical problem, it is essential to implement stringent anti-corruption measures, such as establishing oversight bodies, strengthening law enforcement, and reforming political and economic systems. By tackling the root causes of corruption through comprehensive reforms, countries can effectively combat this detrimental phenomenon and pave the way for progress and prosperity. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by Leeds Travels and Lifestyle channel. If you enjoy this video, click the like button, comment, and share with your friends. If this is your first time on this channel, click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell for more valued content. See you in the next video. Happy travels and happy lifestyle.